y'all, this is Billy, the permaculture pimp daddy at Perma Pastures Farm, but I'm not at Perma Pastures Farm today. I'm out here with some new friends that I'm so glad that I've taken the time. I was out for a very different reason. But anybody that's ever watched my channel has probably, to some extent or another, seen this guy next to me and his lovely wife, and this is Sean and Holly, and so what do we call y'all? The modern yeoman and wife?
Yeoman and Yeowoman.
The modern yeoman, the modern yeowoman.
I can see how that could be misunderstood, but
Yeowoman.
Yeowoman.
Make me dinner.
Woman. I can see that, yeah. Hey folks, it is awesome. I know that I've had a very enlightening day hanging out.
So have we. It has been extremely enlightening hanging out with this man today.
Absolutely.
Very informative.
I don't get that every day, but
For more
Michelle,
than just permaculture reasons.
Michelle, did you hear that?
He's a wise man.
Edit this thing, back it up, play it for your mom a couple of times, just for GP. It's, on a whim, I was actually out there with another homesteader, and it was a last minute thing. There was a series of events that happened. We kind of talked about it. See, these are the things that I wish we caught on camera, where I had this unction to reach out to you, and it turned out that it was probably a good thing.
Good timing, yes.
And it was really, folks, there's conversations that don't happen on this camera that I wish I could put on here. Maybe we can do this in a members only section.
Yes.
Let's start with the basic stuff. How did y'all get here? I know that you were initially in somewhere up north.
Yeah, so we started, our journey begins up north in Michigan. We lived in the suburbs of Ann Arbor in a little town called Ypsilanti, and we had lived there for what?
7 years.
7 years or so. We had a nice house in the suburbs. It was a 1/4 acre, and we actually had done a little bit of homesteading light up there, I guess you could say. Gardening. We had 4 chickens.
We had 4 chickens because that was the limit.
That was the limit.
That was the limit.
That's
we had
all
a chicken. We had a permit.
The
for our
township
chickens.
would allow you. You had to get a permit for the chickens, and that's what we had. That's where our story starts. So I think it was in 2019 or so that we decided to sell that house up there for a number of reasons. But the big one is we have family down here. We wanted to be close to them, and also the winters were starting to get a little bit old for us, and so we're in the Knoxville area right now, but we had decided we had set on the town of Asheville in western North Carolina, very close to where this man is from. And so we actually we were kind of sick of owning a house, so we lived in an apartment for what?
A year and a half?
Year and a half.
We didn't make it that long.
In the town of Asheville, which is a great town, but apartment living, it was convenient at times, but we slowly began to kind of miss being out. I think you had said it once. You missed being on the ground floor.
Yeah, I missed being able to walk outside and put my feet in the grass.
Yes, and so we were like on the 3rd floor of this apartment building. And so there was a global pandemic that you may have heard of that hit while we were there. And there was a time that we went to the grocery store shortly after this hit, and we looked around. I was telling you about this. We looked around, and even staples, things like potatoes, rice, onions, all of them were gone. They had just disappeared from the shelf. And so that was kind of the point where we just looked at each other and
we were already thinking about getting a house again, and that was just, oh no, now it's time. Now we've got to do this.
Now we need to be a little more sincere about getting out of the apartment and looking for land. And so that's when our journey kind of began, was maybe last May, I'd say.
We started looking.
And at first we looked in the Asheville area, but we were coming up dry. It seemed like it was slim pickings, like it was hard to find stuff. We looked in Leicester, we looked in Marshall, we looked up by a little bit north of there. We were just having a really tough time finding things. And so, eventually we thought, well, my folks and my sister and her family live out here in the Knoxville area. Why don't we start looking out here? And so we ended up finding this place towards the end of the summer of last year. And we initially bought this house that we're in with the 4 acres surrounding it. and that's a whole other story. We were very happy to get onto this land, but then shortly after we bought this place, my parents took notice of the land next to us right here. There's a small house there with about 6 acres surrounding our land. So the two parcels together form about 10 acres, and they put a bid in on that land, and they actually got it. So we ended up becoming a multifamily homestead. We live here, my parents live there. Altogether, we have about 10 acres that we share, and we're trying to make a go of being as self-sustaining as possible. Going back to that moment in the grocery store where we looked around and there wasn't any food. How do we achieve food freedom for ourselves? Even if that takes a long time, how can we get there? So despite all my long-windedness, that's kind of the main point of why we did this, is we want to kind of create our own food source. And so we're making a go of it here. And we've been here now since September.
How have you made the transition, Holly? I mean, we were talking a minute ago, and folks, I talked with them earlier about a phenomenon called a permaculture divorce, where one person is in and one person isn't. Did you go into this kicking and scratching, or did y'all make this as a joint decision, like, hey, this is the way we want to go? And how's it working out for you?
We very much made this as a joint decision. It's funny, back in Michigan, I was the one that really spearheaded the efforts of the garden, because I grew up gardening. My dad's side of the family is all farmers, and I grew up having a garden as a little girl. So in Michigan, I was always spearheading the gardening efforts, and I was the one who introduced him to Joel Salatin back in the day. Mm-hmm. And then when we decided to move, so it was really more my thing back in the day. And then when we decided to move here, I feel like he picked up on more of the passion. And so this is really, he's been spearheading this project, but we're both all in. We'll bicker sometimes about I want to put this here. No, you should put it here. I don't, we'll bicker about location and things like that. But in terms of both of us having a vision, we're all in together.
Permaculture is our passion.
There you go. Yeah. You got a lot of land out here to where if you wanted, let's say you wanted an orchard over here. Well, you could say, okay, you put yours over there, Sean.
Maybe we'll do that. That might be a good idea.
We've actually done that. It didn't work out so well, not within our family, but when we were afforded up with someone else, didn't work out no matter how we did it. So making that transition from, it just occurred to me that this is the first time in my life somebody said, yeah, we moved from a house. We hated the house life, so we got to an apartment. And then you made the transition back to a house on land.
Yeah.
And so this is not necessarily familiar to either one of you. In terms of living on this much land, this isolated, this far out?
This is actually really similar to where I grew up. I grew up in Northwest Arkansas in the Ozark Mountains, and we lived out in the middle of nowhere. It took me 45 minutes to drive to school.
Okay.
We lived on about 7 acres and very rural. So this is actually very similar to my roots. But the interesting thing is, for many reasons, I worked very hard to escape that lifestyle, and I promised I'd never go back to it. And here I am right back in it.
I suspected you were accustomed to it to some extent, because when I see the typical, let's say, city slicker out here in an environment, you're she's going after the bugs. Hey, look, this cicada flew into my tea, and then drinks the tea.
That actually happened too.
She spit the cicada out from her teeth and the whole nine. So it's cool. So a lot of people in record numbers are getting into the homesteading space. And by the way, folks, check out the Modern Yeoman. If you haven't, I said it before, this guy is a phenomenal storyteller, and it's entertaining. It's just fun to watch, if nothing else. But also, I follow this journey every step of the way, both of them. She's not in the videos quite so much, but she is every once in a while.
Every once in a while.
He's
always filming when I'm with clients. It's his fault.
But you want to check this out. If for no other reason, it's a masterful way of telling a story. You're not watching an NPR episode with this guy. You're seeing something unfold, and it's fun to watch. And frankly, the whole journey, seeing it with my own 2 eyes, knowing that there was none of this here before now. So folks, do like me, follow along with the journey, because I don't watch a whole lot of YouTube channels. I do watch this
Pressure is on now.
It's
I've
on.
got to produce.
He better bring it.
But-
Speaking of producing, what have we started here? I mean, you guys got here back in September, and what I'm looking at, and folks, this is a lesson here because they're taking it piece by piece. They got here in September last year, right?
Mhm.
September of last year. Yep.
Okay, none of this was here that's in this frame, but it is now. How's that going, and how did you do it? Did you take it in pieces, or just say, you know, how did you go about making all this happen?
So I think I was talking to you about it a little bit earlier, but my whole philosophy that I talk about on the channel a lot, slowly. There was somebody from the island nation of Cyprus, I think, and they said they have a saying in their country. It said, slowly, that's a saying. And that really stuck with me because I started to realize that if I were to look at this entire property and think about all the things I want to do, I would get overwhelmed and I'd be more likely to do none of them because I'd just be so overwhelmed with all the things I needed to do. So I started to realize, like, okay, if I break things down into small, incremental tasks that I can do and I can work at them and build up small successes, eventually I could get to bigger wins. And so I just started trying it out. I developed what I called the beachhead philosophy. I just want to get a little beachhead and just start and get a toehold. And eventually a toehold becomes a foothold. And then eventually I've got a bigger grasp on it. So a better way of putting that, I think, is taking things down into smaller tasks, small tasks as I can make them. And so I started with the barn project, and the barn was disgusting. It was filled with industrial waste. There was so much junk inside of there. And I looked at it and it's like, there's no way I'm going to be able to clean all this up. It's going to take forever. So I just devoted like half an hour a day among other tasks that I was doing. It's like, all right, I've got nothing else to do other in this half hour than to just start cleaning the barn. Before I knew it, 2 weeks or maybe 3 weeks had passed and the entire barn was cleaned out, all from just doing things a little bit at a time. And so that's been our philosophy. We started wanting to get a beachhead here on the home acre, the property that's just surrounding the house. And so we figured, what's the very first thing we can do? The gateway drug to homesteading is chickens. So
we got those. Well, I think you were a little irritated at me. I wanted chickens.
She pushed for chickens right
I
away.
wanted chickens.
Did it show up in the mail?
No, we got them at a local farm store here. I wanted chickens like it was a week or two after we moved in. I was like, I want chicks.
It was literally
and
like
he
a
was
week
like,
after we
no,
moved
I
in.
have to get the infrastructure built. And then I talked to him and I said, no, we can brood them out while you build the infrastructure. So we did that. And he was actually, you're happy that we did.
I am glad. I'm glad that we have this flock that we have now and that we started them when we did. And there's no deadline quite like having a bunch of chicks in a brooder that need a house that they need to live in.
And we got our eggs sooner.
So we started
with the chickens.
That was our very first thing. Let's get chickens. And that's what we did. And it was a lot easier than a lot of people think it might be.
Chickens are so easy.
Chickens are very easy.
Yeah.
And so after we got the chickens going, we kind of focused on cleaning things up, which, believe it or not, that's actually a pretty big task, cleaning things up.
It was a mess here.
There was so much trash, like I said, just in the barn alone, and kind of finding where we wanted to put things. And so after that, we tried to figure out where we wanted the garden. We knew we wanted it close, zone 1, right outside the house. And so we decided on this area right behind us where we'd put the garden. So I started building raised beds with some of the salvage lumber that was up in the barn. And that's what we did. That was our next project, was building the garden. And so right now, I think our main task is focusing on getting meat birds, broilers. I think that's going to be our next major task. But I think one thing we started to realize, and Billy, you can probably attest to this, is there's always a lot to do. There's always projects that we need to work on. So it's just been a matter of kind of juggling what we need to focus on. But those have been the first things, chickens and a garden.
You know, one cool thing is right off the bat, when I first got here, we sat at this table for quite a while, and I was floored for a whole bunch of reasons that I can't tell you about. They shocked me in so many ways that I can't tell you about.
Hopefully good ways.
Wonderful ways. And Matt from Sovereign Village Project, you already know the way that I'm talking about. Because you never know, when you show up to somebody's place, you never know what kind of reception you'll get. And you never know if you wear a shirt like this, whether or not they're going to like you when you show up. So I guess it's something of an accidental litmus test. But one thing I did notice right off the bat is things were zoned in the way they should. You've heard me talk about it before where there was a guy who put chickens in zone 5 and then wondered why they all died.
There's the cicada.
There goes one of them. Or a lady, because she was afraid of snakes, put this garden, her raised beds, in zone 3. And would, go out there with buckets every day to go try to water everything. One thing I noticed right off the bat is the zoning. Somebody didn't just throw this in. There was consideration about where you put everything, where y'all decided, are you happy about where it is? Because you had said before, like, I can't remember what you said cooking, but do you want to walk all the way out there to go get something to put in your omelet?
Yeah,
so I take it there's a method in the madness on why this is in such close proximity to the kitchen.
It's deliberate because you walk in the door and our kitchen's right there. And so if I need an herb or something, I just hop out here, clip it, and it's very close to our water sources too, our rain barrels, and turning on the spigot if we need it.
That's what I love. Folks, this is permaculture in action. I don't know that you did it just because it made sense. It was for pragmatic reasons, but that's permaculture, taking things incrementally like you're doing. All these things, whether you know it or not, you can call it permaculture, but it's just common sense, if you ask me. I mean, so you got chickens, you got a garden, got things cleaned up, you got a whole series of, you got a mountain of wood chips over mulch. You'll see that in a minute. You got a mountain of mulch over here, and you have what I think is the most important thing for any homestead, and that is options and hope. I hope that maybe being out here, we've talked about maybe some options and maybe things you haven't yet considered.
Yes.
So after this, do you have plans for what's next? I mean, I see a couple of apple trees over here. You got a garden, you're off and running. You know that you need to improve certain aspects of it. Mm-hmm. But what's going to be the next big thing?
So just talking with you and spending time and just getting an expert's expert's eyeball over the land has been hugely helpful to me. But one thing that I think I want to do next is focus on what types of animals we're going to be working with. So I mentioned the meat birds, the broilers. That's probably our big next step. And then after that, it's probably going to be pigs. And you said something that really encouraged me. You said that you think pigs might be even easier than chickens are.
Much easier.
How does it get easier than chickens?
Yeah, I know. For us, chickens aren't that bad at all. But the reason that's very, that gives me a lot of hope is because there are a lot of places on our land that do need clearing. And one of the best methods of clearing land, just from my short journey in this world, I've learned, is pigs. That's one of the best ways that you can clear land is with pigs. So maybe not by the end of this year, but hopefully early next year, pigs are on the plate. Pigs are on the platter.
Yeah, more ways than one. I wouldn't say I'm an expert at anything. In permaculture, you just learn relations.
Sure.
But I will say at this monastery, when you can snatch the compost from my hand, you may leave this monastery. You think, is that too old a reference? You think people actually get that?
Some do, maybe.
Okay, yeah, the old kung fu thing.
Yeah.
But, okay, that sounds great. I mean, that's the progression. You started, got things cleaned up, got that going, thinking about animals. Are you thinking about, I hope that the visit here did, if nothing else, show you that there can be a relationship between your trees, your forage, your animals, your production, your stock. All these things don't have to be looked in a reductionistic way. They can all work like the fingers of our hand. I hope if I did anything else that maybe I was able to expose that relationship a little bit more and how you might make your ground way more productive.
Yes.
Make yourself way more profitable because you can combine so many enterprises in a very small, narrow space. All these things that I'm teaching here, folks, on this channel, it's kind of cool when I show up and they're already doing a lot of it. Zoning, knowing how to put things and where to put them is a wonderful thing. But Remember what he said about slowly, because that is the most overlooked part in permaculture, is realizing that I need to observe. I need to take time and see.
Yes.
So when that observation, in that observation period, what decisions have y'all made, or have you made any, or are you still in the fact-finding area?
I'm glad you brought that up, because that is one of the lessons that I've kind of had to kick myself. Sean, you don't need to go in and build everything right away. Part of your job this first year on the property is observing, is seeing where things flood up, is seeing where, seeing how the seasons treat each acre of land. That's been a learning process for me. I don't like sitting around, but I've begun to learn that observing isn't sitting around. It's a very active process. So going out there, I've actually walked out here with a notebook and have taken notes on things I haven't noticed before. That sinkhole new, I haven't noticed that before. Where is this seasonal stream running this month? That's been a very active thing that I've tried to engage in. So initially, when people told me, when I started my homesteading journey, and I heard from a lot of permaculture experts, you need to do a lot of sitting here this year and observing and taking notes. At first, when I heard that, I was like, they're just saying that. They're just saying that. You need to have a full-on operation by the time your first year is up. No, you're setting yourself up for failure if you do that. It's really important to observe. And so in terms of what we've learned so far, a lot about our soil, right?
Yeah.
And your visit here has been really helpful for us in finding out what some of our issues with our soil is, and how we have maybe some compaction issues. We've got very clay-heavy soil out here in East Tennessee that we have to deal with, and finding out ways that we can use animals down the line to help amend that soil. Soil is a bigger deal than I think a lot of people realize, and we've learned a lot by observing over these past few months what places are best suited for certain activities. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. I want to know, this is a little bit off the beaten path a little bit, because I want to definitely ask. I met a lot of people that are in these times right now. You got marriages falling apart. You have so many things happening, and people are making rash decisions getting into this lifestyle and regret it. Do you have any buyer's remorse on that for both of you? I mean, are you out here now and wish, no, I think I liked it better at an apartment? Or maybe this farm lifestyle, have you had any second thoughts? Do you wake up and love it? Do you go to sleep thinking about what you want to do the next day? Where are you at in that continuum?
Yeah.
Have you,
no regrets for me, none. And it's something I actually talked about in my last video, is that sometimes I think the best things in my life I've found are the things I've really had to fight for.
That's right.
Homesteading isn't easy. I think most people realize that when you get into this world and when you get into this life, it's not easy. And I don't want to say defined by failure, but my failures have been maybe 80% of the process. And that makes me love the 20% that are the successes that much more. Would I go back to an apartment?
No.
Not in a million years.
Neither of us would.
Yeah, but you're failing while daring greatly.
Yeah, the man in the arena, right?
One of my favorite speeches.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I realized that part of this journey is going to be defined by failure, but I don't care. I wouldn't trade it for a second. We made a deliberate decision to come out here, and I think slowly, within 2 or 3 years, we will have something that's thriving. We're working on it right now, but we actually, it's not corny. It's actually really cool. We created like a little vision list of where we see ourselves in 5 years. And we have some really cool ideas about how this place will thrive.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree? How do you feel about it?
I don't regret it for a second either. You know, there are some times when I get a little itchy out here. Like, I was raised in a very rural environment, and I, spent a lot of time in Chicago and big cities and mid-sized cities. and so there's some days out here where I get a little itchy, but you know what? Then I go into town and I can't wait to get back here.
Yeah.
It might be a different story. 2020 changed a lot for us, and 2020 was a big driver to get us out here into this lifestyle. Pre-2020, I don't know if we would have made the decision to come out here and do this, but post-2020, I don't want to live in a city. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah.
So sometimes do I get a little itchy, scratchy out here in the sticks? Yeah, but then I go into town and I remember why we made this
We're on the same
decision.
page.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
see, no permaculture divorces here, y'all. That is so awesome. I mean, it's been a real joy. Now, folks, just so you kind of get a snapshot of what I'm talking about on how shocked I am, I can make an obscure reference about Teddy Roosevelt, and they get it. They don't even know. I didn't tell you I was going to talk about that. How many people even know? But it's true. That's what I love about that speech, is that there's certain issues I might have had with Teddy Roosevelt, but regarding that person in the arena, he says man in the arena, but it applies to everybody. It's that part at the end where you fail while daring greatly. So your soul is never entwined with those cold and timid souls that know neither victory nor defeat. And that's the cool thing about this, is that going out there on this ledge doing something you've never done before.
Nope.
You may fall flat on your face, but it's knowing that I'm failing while daring greatly, and you're going to fail. Like you said, there's a fairer portion of failure than than anybody's willing to admit, I think, in a lot of these channels. But that's what I love about this channel, is that all the warts are exposed, and it's taught me a great deal about that too, as far as people expect me to be an expert, but I'm not always going to get it right, and there's a lot of times I don't. And I try to be upfront with that, but nobody is more upfront with, like, whether things are crashing in the barn or whether you got electrical wires down. Yeah. It's not a hey, look at all the showcase of all the mistakes I've made. One thing I will say, in your last video, you gave yourself a report card.
Yeah.
And I think you were a little tough.
Sean's tough on himself? Really?
I think you were a little tough. I do. Because if I take stock as an outsider looking at this, because I've watched you from the very beginning. I've watched from the very beginning when y'all were talking about doing this, and you weren't yet here. You gave yourself a B in some areas, even a C. You might even have thrown in an A.
Yeah.
Looking at this from the outside, folks, I'm going to tell you, you two are getting an A+ in my book, because you're not just off and running doing this. You're allowing yourself to make mistakes, and unlike a number of other people I know out there, you're redirecting. You're like, okay, this is the way I was going. It's not working out. I'm going to go another way. Other people don't do that. There's a lot of people out there that don't do that, and that's why they're going to be a success at this. And there's no shortage to hard work. It's dressed in overalls and looks like hard work. That's what this lifestyle is. That was another quote.
Thomas Edison, right?
Dude! Right on! Okay. And then, the modern yeoman, that's why I was drawn to your channel. I was like, I'm a fan of Jefferson. I wonder if that's where he got it from.
The yeoman farmer.
See that?
Which actually, didn't you say that term, if you trace it back, doesn't have roots in Tennessee, which is where we are?
Well, it depends on, there's
an English.
There's the English too, so there's a lot of different etymologies of that term.
But there was something linked to Tennessee.
So there were subsistence farmers in eastern Tennessee and western North Carolina in the 18th century and 19th century. They were poor. They usually only had a few acres. They had no servants, no slaves. They worked for themselves. They were subsistence farmers, and back in those days, they were often known as yeoman farmers. And there's something that really hit me pretty deep when I read about that. They were making their own life. That doesn't mean to say they didn't have a community. That doesn't mean to say that they weren't out engaging with other people and trading and taking part in the economy. I'm sure they were. They weren't hermits, but they were making a living for themselves. They were eating the food that they grew on their land. Now, we're not there just yet, but something about that idea really struck a chord in me. And I think that was a big part of the reason that I was attracted to the term yeoman. There's also the Jeffersonian term, the yeoman farmer, that I find pretty attractive as well. But that idea of those subsistence farmers in Appalachia, that they grew all their own food, all of it. They either grew it or they found it out in the woods.
This is one of those times where I'm really gonna cry as I go down the road, you know, because it's been such a joy just being here. What do you say to all those people? Because we have record numbers of people in the Back to the Land movement.
We do.
That are considering this, that are considering in a big way the very things you two are doing right now. What do you say from both of you to those people that are considering getting into this and, you know, scarcely a year into it yourself? You're off and running. What would you tell these people that are, if you say slowly, I'm going to push that chair over.
I was thinking about that.
What would you tell anybody considering getting into this?
Do you want me to start?
Sure.
Drop it like it's hot.
So it's along the lines of slowly, but I would say definitely start small, learn, get your feet wet. We've got some family up in Michigan that they went big and hard. Like, they got the huge greenhouse and like big infrastructure and big equipment, and like it's just sitting there because they bit off more than they could chew. And so I think the two biggest things is, you know, if you have land that you're working and getting into this, the zones that you talk about, starting close and then taking on, don't bite off more than you can chew, because it's really easy to get discouraged if you do that. And if you're searching for a home or property, it really helps to write a personal letter. That's the only reason.
That blew my mind.
The only
how they
reason
acquired this place.
We ended up with this property. There was someone who put in an all cash bid that was higher than what we put. So they should have gotten it all cash and a higher offer. But we got this place because we put in a personal letter of intention about what we were going to do with the land, how we were going to steward it, why we wanted to come to the area, and that was what got us this place.
That whole story it unfolds a little bit longer than that, but it is astonishing. So when I talk about all those times where I buy land creatively, off the beaten path, this is another one of those methods where, when they told me, it floored me, and I purchased land, a lot of it, and I never once thought of doing what I just learned here today. So this is the beauty of being able to cross-pollinate with such wonderful people. What would you tell them?
There's some practical things. I think it's probably really good to have as little debt as possible. We were able to erase our student debt and credit card debt shortly before we moved out here. That helped us a lot, but I wouldn't want that to stop people if they still had to deal with that. I wouldn't want to stop people from necessarily exploring this lifestyle. But another thing that has often occurred to me is, like Holly said, don't try to boil the ocean. Don't try and think about too much of the big picture. I think it's reasonable to break things into very small steps. Are we interested in doing this? Let's talk about it. Okay, you've talked about it. That's a good thing. That's a good first step, talking about it. Okay, what would it mean to buy property right now? Let's take a look around. Okay, we'll take a look around. Okay, maybe we should talk to a real estate agent. If you break it up like that, it's a lot easier to handle. And I guess that's just how we're trying to do this whole process. Don't think too big when you start. Think small. I guess that's what I would say. Don't be afraid to think big. Eventually you're going to want to think big. And today I've had some conversations that have really got me thinking big. But when you're just starting, if you think big, that can be overwhelming. So don't be afraid to think small. Think in terms of your next month. Think in terms of your next week. buying land right now is pretty crazy.
You get the ant.
That's all this is.
Yeah. Buying land right now, from what I hear, is pretty crazy. So keep your options open and don't be afraid to think small.
Let me add to that. In the words of a wise man, slowly. Slowly.
Now you get to push his chair over.
I didn't want you to say it. I wanted to do it. But honestly, I heard you echoing. I actually heard that in my head the other day when I was doing something. It wasn't going quite as fast as I'd like. And I thought of that slowly. So profound, very simple, but very, very profound. I could go on talking to you guys, and I already have. I'm probably losing my voice at this point. These are wonderful folks, and you want to check them out. And if they do a fraction of what I kind of threw out here, my goodness, hold on to your hats. This place is going, it already is highly productive. It's about to be way more productive with the focus and the things they have. So I definitely want you to check them out at the Modern. Was there another way that people can get a hold of you?
That's probably the easiest way, and I'm sure we can include the link up here. The Modern Yeoman is the channel name. If you just type in the Modern, and Yeoman is Yeoman. That's probably the easiest way. I've got an Instagram, but I use it.
Update it.
I update it every day, but I don't pay as much attention to it as I probably should. I do little haikus every day.
They're really cool. Homestead haikus.
I think that's the Modern Yeoman as well,
Yeah.
but you can find that through the YouTube channel.
Or just Instagram the Modern Yeoman.
Yeah.
It's been a real joy to hang out here with these two. Make sure you check them out. Holly needs to be in more videos.
Yes, she does. I agree.
She's wicked smart, and so is he. And it's so cool to be able to make these. It's really a day trip to get here. I mean, it took me. I was coming from another place. But folks, get out there, cross-pollinate with some of the people around there. Maybe you've seen them on YouTube. Some of these folks are more accessible than you think. And reach out to them, cross-pollinate, because you may find out that you got friends 2 hours away that you didn't even know. So until next time, this is Billy, the Permaculture Pimp Daddy, where PIMP stands for Permaculture is my passion. And it's also a passion, meeting wonderful new people. It's been a real pleasure.
It really has. Thank you so much for coming out here and bringing us on here.
We'll see you next time, y'all.